you can be absolutely sure and certain that they would not have wanted to have been the team to lose the Eden Park record. Scott Robertson would not have wanted to be the coach who surrendered Eden Park to the Wallabies.
We have such a low bar of tolerance when it comes to the All Blacks. If we lose a game, we have to improve the next game, and that's what the side had to do.
By the time they do the seedings for the 27 World Cup, being inside the top six and we're going to six pools, that's going to be crucial.
Welcome to the DSPN.
He's given him. Wow, there you go. He was forward.
Oh, a punch up now in midfield. Fraser's involved.
The Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome to the podcast, people. DSPN means Martin Devlin, Lachlan War, providing content for you across Spotify Video, Apple Podcasts, Rover, and on the DSPN YouTube channel. Thank you so much for supporting us. If you can click that subscribe button on the DSPN YouTube channel, we will love you forever. We're well over 16,000 subscribers now. We want to try and get to 20,000 by the end of the year. If you're enjoying this content and you think, somebody else that might like to watch or listen as well, let them know and make sure they hit that subscribe button for us. We are still in post-match mode, reviewing the Rugby Championship. Before that, though, as always, we start the show the same way every day with a sermon from the mountaintop.
Marty's Sermons, brought to you by WebWonks. Generate online leads with WebWonks. Doctors for your Google data.
We live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots.
Are we any better, our All Blacks? Have we improved? That, for me, is the number one question about our team I want answered after the Rugby Championship wrapped up early Sunday morning. I've left it a couple of days to think about this. I do believe that we have improved. Just improved since the July 3-test series versus France. Improved from last week's win over Australia at Eden Park. Definitely improved. I think all of us will acknowledge that since the shellacking in Wellington from the box. And I even think marginally improved since we beat Ireland in Dublin last November. Now that last one is also the most important one because we need to be improving year upon year. We have to be improving because it does seem that all of our major opponents are doing so on an annual basis. Aussie are better this year than they were last. Same for South Africa. Argentina, maybe they've stayed pretty much the same. Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales, we're all about to find out where they're at very shortly. The All Blacks, they were always about raising the bar. That is the definition of this team. So we expect improvement as much as we know we need it, something we simply have to keep aspiring to. Ireland away last year was probably our most important test win of 2024. Very difficult place to go and play against the then reigning Six Nation champs. The importance of winning that game as much as the result itself is the confidence boost that it gives this particular group of players in being able to prove to themselves that yes, we are indeed capable of winning the most important games, beating the very best sides, and doing so away from home, just like we're going to have to in Australia in 2 years' time. Remember that before beating Ireland, we'd played the Rugby Championship, losing twice to South Africa, making that 4 losses in a row to them. Aussie, we were beating no problem at all. Argentina was starting to annually get one over us. And then following Ireland, we were foot-tripped by France, a very narrow loss it was in a game that it looked for a long time we'd win. Winning in Perth on the weekend, going back-to-back versus the Wallabies, is a good, solid step forward after the debacle that was our record ever loss in Wellington. This is called bounce back. The All Blacks have just done what the Springboks couldn't, and that's beat Australia twice this season. Now, that's not anything to be sneezed at, nor is the fact that this team, these current players, have also beaten every top team in the world over the last 23 tests. And I include France in that because we didn't choose the French squad that came down here. That has to be good for the self-belief and confidence, especially with what now lies in wait. Any and all positives gleaned from the Rugby Championship are about to be hugely tested in a few weeks' time. The Grand Slam Tour is an enormous challenge. 4 massive tests, with 2 especially, England at Twickenham and Ireland in Chicago. The new and most immediate measuring stick for the year's performance. And also just how far this All Black side has actually come. Have they improved? We're about to find out. I think we can feel semi-satisfied with where we're currently at. 43 players used, obvious signs of improvement, as I keep saying. Some very good wins. All, of course, tempered with 2 very sobering losses, and one in particular, Wellington, the scars of which will never go away because that's our worst ever Test rugby defeat. That word ever. What player ever wanted to be part of that piece of All Blacks history? No one. So back to the original question. Have we in fact improved? I'd like to think so, yes. But we also know that we'll only for sure know If so, and by how much after the Grand Slam tour? The real test is the next 4, and they're all away from home. We continue our post-match on the Rugby Championship here on the DSPN. Welcome to it, people. Thanks again for joining us. Click that subscribe button. We'll absolutely love you for that. Leave us a comment as well. Time for an Australian perspective, because let's not forget, this tournament kicked off like an absolute rocket at Ellis Park. When down 22-0 after 17 minutes, I think most of us were ready to hit the remote and turn the tally off. And then what happened? The Wallabies turned in an extraordinary performance. Did they ever get that good again throughout the Rugby Championship? Well, Brett McKay from the 8-9 Combo podcast is joining us, RugbyPass. He's going to let us know his thoughts on this. 3 consecutive losses to finish with, and now a hell of a northern tour in prospect where Japan and Italy are kind of sandwiched around England, Ireland and France. It is an agenda. Plus, there's also the coaching conundrum is who's actually in charge and why is Joe Schmidt still there? We've got lots to talk about. But welcome back, my friend.
Thank you, mate. Great to be back. It's actually, I think we're overdue for this little couple of week window of break that we've got. It's been a long season already, hasn't it?
Yeah, so much to look forward to, though. And, we've been talking about it during the week. The All Blacks got a Grand Slam. You guys, as I say, got 5 big tough tests. But let's get on to that in a couple of minutes. Right from the start, my first question, where are you at? And have you actually improved? Because when you look at that result in that second half performance against the Box, which just blew international rugby out of the water in that opening game, you lost the last 3. Now, it doesn't matter what you say about improvement, but just in terms of results, you lost the last 3.
Yeah, it's like you've read the draft of my my column for RugbyPass this week, because I've asked that exact question, and it's a fair one. It's and I've even sort of written in my column that it's actually really hard to gauge where they are now, because the way they came out of the Lions series, the way they won at Ellis Park, played really well at Cape Town as well. But since then, it sort of feels like a few bad habits have crept in, and as you say, 3 straight losses now is undeniable. It raises more than a few questions. Where I got to in my conclusion in the article is that they're definitely a better team than where they were this time last year. They're definitely a better team than what took the field against Fiji and Newcastle at the start of this year.
Agreed.
So we can say they're a better team. Are they as good right now, right this week in October, as they were, coming back from South Africa? I'm not quite so sure on that. If it does feel like that they've maybe gone back a step or two, but we've got an opportunity to see in November whether they can get back to those heights with, as you say, 5 tests coming up and some pretty hard contests amongst them.
Yeah, Brett, because just while you're thinking that, I'm also thinking, okay, so where are our landmarks? The Rugby World Cup, and the last one is obviously the low point, right? And then you're building from there. And then there was a lot of hope and a lot of renewed confidence when the Grand Slam was kind of like there behind a cloud for a couple of weeks last year on the Northern Tour. It didn't end so well. Then that Fiji test, and it's like, my God, and then the performances in South Africa, which you managed to do something that very few sides ever do, which is win at Ellis Park. But not only that, just give them a real backhander. And as you say, then go to Cape Town. Yet from there, I don't know whether there's an over-reliance on certain players, but when we break down that game against Perth on the weekend, and we've obviously talked a lot on the podcast about that this week, I didn't feel the All Blacks were in danger of ever losing that game, even though the possession stats and everything were in your favour in the first half. You did a lot of neat passes, you did a lot of risky stuff which came off in the wet and the conditions, but by the end of the second half, it was like you'd kind of run out of ideas, and all the All Blacks did was play great traditional test match rugby, got down urine, kicked 3 points, Sean Fitzpatrick style, look at the scoreboard, we're up by 9, you have to score twice, game over.
Yeah, and that's not far off the mark. The first 20 or 25 minutes were really, really strong, but just losing the ball the wrong parts of the field. New Zealand played more, like 3/4 of the game in the Australian half. Like 3/4 of the New Zealand possession was in the Australian half, whereas Australia were very much locked between the 22s. So they couldn't quite get into the right areas of the field. So I think that comes down to how well and where they're kicking from, and whether they're kicking for the right reasons and not just for the sake of kicking. There's lots of questions about that. turnovers conceded has been steadily creeping up over the last few weeks, and that's been a theme. That penalties conceded has been a theme of the three straight losses. You're right. New Zealand were in control. They closed out the game particularly well. New Zealand had something like 90% of possession in the last 10 minutes in Perth. So, Australia get back to within 2 points with 10 minutes to go. And at that point, I'm thinking, okay, there's still a result here. They had 5% of possession in the next 10 minutes. You can't win a game of football like that.
No.
You cannot win a game of football like that. So, there's the way, and that was the same for Auckland the week before. It was the same thing. It was a ridiculously high amount of possession in the last 10 minutes that New Zealand had that just meant they could close the game out. And for all of the All Blacks faults, which, I know you've been picking out weekly and daily for the last couple of months.
There you go.
What they have been able to do really well this year is close out wins. They've remained ruthless in that particular area, and the Wallabies found that out the hard way in successive weeks. So
and
there's certainly plenty to address.
That was something that we have certainly improved upon from last year, where we couldn't score any points, remember, in the last 20. And look, remiss of me as well, just not to landmark that Lions tour as well, because, again, I'm just thinking, are you as good as you were at times during the second test, the first half of the second test of that, and also how you closed out that third test? Look, it always comes back to the same question with Australian rugby, doesn't it? The brilliance of Joe Schmidt aside, or whoever is coaching that team, and I don't think Dave Rennie was a bad coach, and I don't think Robbie Deans was a bad coach, I don't think Checker was a bad coach. Do you have the cattle available? And there were times during this calendar year up until now where you think, if you get your A team fit and out there, but the one thing that the All Blacks and the Springboks are able to do, 47 players for Rassie, 43 players for us. We do have a conveyor belt. It's like watching Bruce Forsyth, and all the toys go past. Remember the old program, the old day? We can actually keep picking, okay, whereas you guys still don't have that. So there's got to be a long-winded way of asking, but there's got to be a developmental aspect to parts of this Northern Tour. But there's also got to be a handbrake time where it goes, come on, we've got a World Cup at home in 2 years' time. When do we actually get this combination, this squad settled enough to give them enough experience to give them the right opportunities at home in that World Cup? Yeah.
So there's a couple of elements there. From a developmental point of view, Australia A are going to Japan at the same time the Wallabies do. They'll play Japan 15 in Osaka a few days beforehand, before the Tokyo test. So there's more game time getting into fringe players, and that's important. We've just had the short, sharp Australian domestic tournament. Super Rugby Oz was finished on the weekend. So
it usually takes between Friday and Saturday morning, doesn't it? It's about 36 hours.
It was a short, sharp tournament, for sure. But as I've said to people, mate, the most important thing about this tournament is that it's actually been played, because we haven't had an NRC since it was a COVID casualty, and the hole between club rugby and Super Rugby is only getting bigger. So we digress off that. Australia's also used 42 or 43 players this year. So Josh Fluke was the 42nd or 43rd player. So it's been a bit of a casualty ward. Just in the last 2 weeks, they've been without Tom Wright. They've been without Andrew Kellaway. Rob Valentini only just come back in for Perth. Will Skelton only lasted 15 minutes in Perth. There's certainly been players out with injury, and that's obviously not an excuse. But when you look at what's behind them, then the question about depth arrived. Here's a little factoid that I found whilst putting together the RugbyPass column last night. This year, the Wallabies have used 7 different starting halves combinations.
Bloody
in
hell.
10 tests.
Really?
And then four more unique pairings off the bench. So that's 11 different halves pairings in 10 tests in 2025. And that's, I knew it was a few. I was blown away by that number. I didn't think it was anywhere near that high. Yeah.
Well, okay, that's a couple of things, isn't it? Okay, so that's either that you're blooding a lot of depth, or you are scratching. One of those two things.
It's injuries, unfortunately. It's all been injury forced when you think about it. Jake Gordon missed large chunks of the early part of the season. He's only just come back now. Nick White played 4 or 5 tests that through the Lions series, he's probably thinking he wasn't going to get. He's had to unretire a couple of times. Tate McDermott gets a start at either end of the series. He's now gone for the rest of the year. Ryan Lonergan's finally got his opportunity, and he's looked pretty good so far in 2 tests. But in the number 10, it's been Liner, it's been Donaldson, it's been O'Connor, it's Edmund at the moment. Where does it stop? And then we're realising now as well, if if one of O'Connor or Edmed goes down, like Ben Donaldson's fit, played for the Western Force on the weekend in the Oz final, he'll go on the spring tour, I'm sure. If there's another injury at number 10, bloody hell, there's not many options left back in Australia right now, and that's why this Super Rugby Oz tournament has been so crucial, and it's why next year through Super Rugby, it's going to be a great time to be a young number 10 in one of the Australian states.
Brad, not that you care that much, but I just do want a quick comment from you on the fact that you played us back into form, and after we got smacked up in Wellington and a record loss, it was so important for this All Black side to win those two games. Now we've got to go again like you have to and actually produce results, and we'll talk about the Northern Tour in a second, but just what were your thoughts on the fact that the All Blacks were able to win those two test matches, win them relatively comfortably in the end, but also what does it just prove to this this team of All Black players that they can actually do that and they've got the ability to rebound, which is what All Black rugby has been built upon?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think there would have been a bit of anxiety going into Auckland, particularly because you can be absolutely sure and certain that they would not have wanted to have been the team to lose the Eden Park record. Scott Robertson would not have wanted to be the coach who surrendered Eden Park to the Wallabies. So there would have been a bit of anxiety about it. I think there's still degrees of scratching around for combination things like that, but they would and should take confidence out of two pretty solid performances over the last 2 weeks. There was a lot of questions being asked of them going into this Splendour Cup series, and I think a good few of them have been answered now. They're probably not where they want to be still, but they are winning games when perhaps they're not playing as well as they'd like to be, and that's always a good sign. The Wallabies won the third Lions Test, win at Ellis Park, win the first test against Argentina in Townsville, and I think in all three of those wins, you could throw in the Melbourne Lions Test as well. They'd probably say, yeah, like it was a good result, but, did we actually do everything we wanted to? And I don't think we've actually seen that yet in 2025. No one's going to play for 80 minutes. Like we always desire to see the perfect 80-minute game. It's almost impossible to do that in modern rugby now. But if you can get a really good hour or 65 minutes, you're going to win, a hell of a lot more games than you lose for sure. Okay, so part of the reason I asked that question was obviously to get you to say out loud how much better the All Blacks were and that we have retained the Bledisloe Cup again, obviously. But the main reason for asking was just in terms of degrees I'll still deny it, mate. I will still deny I said it.
Just degrees of improvement, you see, because we have such a low bar of tolerance when it comes to the All Blacks. If we lose a game, we have to improve the next game, and that's what this side had to do. Whereas for you guys, we've been talking about this as we've discussed right through last year, the end of year tour, then the Lions thing, now this, now you've got another one, then we've got another year before the World Cup. If this was any other Australian sports side, say this was your cricketers, for example, they don't get that leeway. They have to rebound from that test defeat to win the next test, as you'll see with the Ashes coming down this Christmas, okay? So when does that happen for this Wallabies group? When does this happen for the coach? When does it actually happen for your rugby, that you just stop talking about improving and you can actually be lock solid on it?
Oh, probably when they're a top 3 or top 2 or top 3 team. That's probably when it happens, and that would be that's true of the All Blacks now. It's true of the Australian cricket team certainly as well. When they're dangers of not being a top 2 or not top 3 team in the world, then the question would be why, and why isn't that the case? So I think they're a way off that yet. We can see that the margins between even 4, 5, 6, 7 in terms of the world rankings are reasonably close. And if the Wallabies happen to get, I think they're probably going to win 3 of the 5 tests in November. Japan's obviously going to be one of those. They need to beat one of England, Ireland, or France. But the incentive is there to do that, because if they beat one or more of them, there's big rankings points to be gained. Yeah. And obviously the big ticket out of these November tests for everyone is that you need to be ranked inside the top 6 by December. By the time they do the seedings for the 27 World Cup, being inside the top 6 and we're going to 6 pools, that's going to be crucial. So there's a huge carrot in front of the Wallabies to do that. I think there's going to be an air of continual improvement about them through to the next World Cup and probably even beyond. Les Kiss takes over. once we get through the 27 World Cup, is he going to continue with the job? I don't know. We're obviously looking into the crystal ball here now. So I think there's just going to be an element of that. Australia doesn't have the luxury of squads of 60 and 75 like France and South Africa seem to. New Zealand's obviously got the production line, as you say. So I think we're a way off that, but this team, this playing group has had enough of a taste of it in 2025 that they know that's where they want to be and that's where they want to get to.
Yeah, well said. In terms of the Bledisloe Cup, what do we do, Brett? Because it's 20-something years now, and I'm not being a smartest by saying that, but it's at the stage now where we were talking about this earlier in the week, and might have been on the weekend myself and Lachlan. And as far as I'm concerned, I remember Richie McCaw. I keep repeating this story. I interviewed him. I think it was in 2011 or 2012, it might have been, and asked him about it. And he said, put it up on every single test. As far as he's concerned, we're the All Blacks, we're Johnson out, put it up. I just want to see at least a points differential or something so that the second test has got everything to play for. It just lacks that bite, doesn't it? Why isn't that big shiny trophy there in Perth and it says, hey, even though it might be squared at 1-1, guess what? You just beat us by 10 points. You take it. Why? I don't understand. Yeah. I mean, to me, these are really simple decisions that are just a rubber stamp job.
Yeah. You've got to get agreement on both sides of the contest, don't you? And as holders, I'm sure New Zealand Rugby wouldn't be giving up something that would make it, easier for them to hold on to. In the same way that, Australia benefited 25 years ago. There were a couple of series there where they held it in a 2-game series.
Yeah, three in a row.
Certainly there's been lots of conversation in the last 2 weeks about, should it be best of 3? And that's forgetting that we only just dropped the third test only about 5 years ago because of, does this actually deserve to be a 3-test series? The aggregate idea has come up before and maybe there is some merit in that. I don't mind the idea of it being up every time it's played. That used to be the case, of course, but it used to only be, one-off tests here and there as well. So, once we get playing 2 and maybe 3 tests a year, do you want it to be up every time? I don't know. That would obviously be one way of doing it. The risk there, I suppose, is that it becomes a home and away thing. Do you hold the cup because you won at home when the real test is the real ability to be rated as a really, really good Bledisloe Cup winning team is winning away.
Yeah, 3-test series, I suppose, if we reintroduce those, otherwise an aggregate. Just going back to your coaching comment there. So we're a bit confused about this. So Joe Schmidt is still the coach. He's the coach on this end-of-year tour. Les Kiss goes on this tour. So, but you were saying to me earlier before the interview started, so Les Kiss doesn't actually take over till July. So he's got another Super Rugby season with the Queensland Reds. So what is Joe Schmidt's role during that? So if he's not going to be the coach come the July internationals, and we don't know how that unfolds yet because we're meant to tour South Africa as well and whatever the Rugby Championship looks like, what is his role exactly? Does he select the squad? Does he do it with Les Kiss? Does he all of a sudden swap seats on the bus? How does this actually practically work?
A great question, Martin. I'm glad you asked because I think we're all wondering and waiting about that as well. So Les Kiss, as I understand, will go on this spring tour, and he has been sort of involved through the Rugby Championship, but very much hands off. And it seems to be a concerted effort of, or a concerted decision to not trying to create too much overlap, which sort of doesn't make a lot of sense to me because one of the key reasons for appointing Les Kiss was that the transition from Joe Schmidt was going to be a smooth one. They've got a long history together through the Island Series system. They've worked together. They're very much on the same page in terms of playing philosophy and approach. So, the transition from one season to the next was going to be relatively smooth. I'd have thought that Les Kiss would be a more proactive participant in the Wallaby setup by now, even.
Yeah,
I think he should be shaping squad and team selection going forward because I don't think we want to get to a point where in July next year, after another Super Rugby season, Joe Schmidt just hands him a folder and says, "Here you go, mate. Do your best.
Here's my laptop."
Here's the handover document I said I'd write for you. It can't be like that. It's not like a 9-to-5 business. I don't know how it's going to work. I'll be intrigued to see how it is. I do feel like that Kiss needs to be more involved than he's going to be through the spring tour. If he's going to be over there but not really involved, then the question is sort of, what is the point of that? Whereas, if he's going to be over there and involved with selection because he's going to be shaping the squad going forward, that makes sense to me. That actually seems like something they should be talking about and should be doing. So it's a really good question that you ask, mate, and we're going to have to find out, I suppose, over the next, 9 months, effectively. The scary part between right now and the 2027 World Cup is there's about 25 tests.
That's a lot.
It's not a huge amount of time.
No, I reckon that's a lot. It's a season and a half. Yeah, that's plenty. So
it's a season and a half, but it's only a season and a half.
All right, let's close out then on the Rugby Championship as a whole, where everyone has been saying that it was a bit like Super Rugby this year. It was a really exciting competition, and it went right down to the last game, which is what you always want in tournaments like this. Obviously, you're in agreement with me that the All Blacks completely robbed. We were stiffed. I mean, we lost by bloody points differential or some bollocks. Look, they smashed us up in Wellington, which was probably even overshadows you guys winning at Ellis Park as the outstanding result, given it is a record defeat for the All Blacks. And when you say that out loud, well, that's a historical mark in the sand, and you can't wash that. That's like us scoring 26 against England, in a Test cricket match, and that's the lowest score ever. Well, that's our worst ever defeat now. Yeah. Having said all that, are these four teams, you did make a point before that 3-7 is pretty damn close. Are these four teams a lot closer now than they were a year ago? So we're going forward into 2027. Has that gap completely shut to you, or not completely, but closed sufficiently?
Yeah, it feels like it has. It definitely feels like it has. There was through, right up until round 5, even after round 5 was played, it still felt like, there were results in dispute. And certainly going into the last block of 2 games, everyone was on 2 wins. There were more than a few scenarios where we get through round 5 and everyone was on 3 wins, and all of those results were plausible. They were all plausible. So on that measurement alone, I think the teams are definitely closer together. I think the fact that the number of tries scored by teams is very, very similar. The way that teams are all playing, like their stat sheets all read very, very similarly. So it's just a matter of ultimately South Africa and New Zealand have finished with 4 wins, and that's probably the difference between top 2 or 3 in the world and being 6 and 7 like Argentina and Australia are. But I'm quite sure that gap between 2 or 3 and 6 or 7 is closer than it's been in a few years, and that's a good thing, because there is so much riding on rankings at the moment, as I say, and on these November tests. There's going to be so much more to play for, and then next year we start talking about Nations Championships and things like that, where there's going to be a true degree of jeopardy about the July and November internationals, and that's probably long overdue as well.
Let's hope that the upcoming internationals, I'm not going to be talking about so much about the refereeing. Well, finally, what do we expect as far as that's concerned? Because obviously the Southern Hemisphere refs can referee these matches. So you're going to have O'Keefe for a couple of matches, and we're going to have the best of it. We'll have Angus for hopefully a couple of our test matches. Well, I hope they do. I hope that they do appoint these guys who are the best refs in the world to those matches. You want to play England at Twickers with him there, Ben O'Keefe there, as opposed to a referee that says we're refereeing international rules, not Super Rugby rules, right?
Yeah, we do. Oh, look, I hate discussions about referees at the best of times, but it certainly feels like the default debate coming out of every match through the Rugby Championship, and it's the same through the Six Nations. It's the same in Super Rugby, to be fair. I think we give refereeing decisions and all that too much airtime. Like I think there's if your go-to argument is refereeing decisions, then maybe you're actually not watching the game as closely as you think, because there's so many other variables that are going on. And even the last 2 weeks I've been saying to people on the socials, look at the turnover count, look at the penalty count, look at the missed tackles. Like they're skill errors. They're skill errors. That's decision making on the field. Your referee's not missing tackles for you. Your referee's not causing a knock on. There's so much more going on in the game that we've got to move on from refereeing and let the refereeing process deal with good and bad performance. I agree with you. I think it would be great to see more of Ben O'Keefe and the Australian guys through the Rugby Championship, through the Bledisloe Cup. Noting Phil Waugh's comments on that topic last week. What this last 12 months and particularly these last few months have highlighted for me is there's a real dearth of South African referees and there's a real dearth of French referees at the moment, because once you take the UK refs and the Ireland refs out of the equation for the Lion series, you take the Australian referees out of the equation, you are really only left with Ben O'Keefe and a couple of others. And that's probably maybe the bigger picture here, is that where are referees coming from at the moment internationally, and are we getting enough from the right parts of the rugby world?
DSPN.